What a lovely day to be a regular Estonian tourist in beautiful Norway. I sure hope nothing wanky happens to my life savings.
Det Norges nye tropper, det Norges frie hær. Det en bøling med seierklopper som samla seg her.
Hi og velkommen til Norge. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? Well, that's because we're in Scandinavia, where the so-called languages of Norwegian, Swedish, and to a degree Danish are pretty much just dialects of one another. Anyways, Norway is one of those countries that like to cut off the coast of literally anyone and everyone that comes close to them, as they stretch from southern Sweden all the way to Russia, or well, whoever you claim to be the owner of the Kola Peninsula. The Norwegians really like the cold, as they hold both the northernmost point in continental Europe, the northernmost inhabited area in the world, and we're the first to the South Pole. Fuck you, Brits, as usual. So with all these territories, you might be wondering, where did they get that oil money so that they live in the utmost luxury? Well, right here in the oil sea, and in this unnatural triangle of the coast of Britain and Denmark, which was given to them after World War II for whatever reason. It is also home to the second longest coastline in the world due to this rugged coast which tourists from all around the world come to see. Not me though, as I am doing a great injustice to this beautiful nation, the likes of which have never been seen before. If you want me to see the Norway everyone knows and loves, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and give me money. So where am I going? Well, Norway is made up of 11 fylker. Is that how Norwegians speak? I don't know, it's how the Swedes speak, so same thing. And in this video I will be visiting the incredibly remote for tourists inland, as well as the capital city of Oslo. But how did all of this come to be? Well, this video has been sponsored by Estoniaball's history lectures. I'll try to keep it short. For a long time, Norway was an inhospitable and desolate land, just as it is today for budget travelers. Surprisingly, settlers eventually arrived at approximately the 10th century BC, and for some reason at the very north of all places. Patch notes really took off around 4000 BC down south, where later the first settlements would be founded. Around 3 to 5000 years ago, the men of the north, eventually Norwegians, and the real men of the north, the Sami, spawned in. Then clans, Roman traders, Germanic and a Norse alphabet paved the way for sea Mongols, the epic Vikings, of which the Norwegians are the most overshadowed, even though they pretty much pioneered. They just sailed west like it was nobody's business until some guy who now everybody claims to be theirs committed Columbus before Columbus was even a thing. But everyone knows that in reality he was Finnish. Why else would they call it Vinland? Then some cool guy united Norway under a kingdom, Christianized it in Nidaros, which is, oh dear, Trondheim. After the Vikings seemingly all died on a bridge in England, a crusade to the Holy Land? And a minor 110-year-long civil misunderstanding, Norway entered its golden age, which was completely undone by a teeny tiny plague, which somehow led to a personal union with Denmark, and then a completely equal Danish union with Sweden. Once that also failed, the two would remain in a union for the next 300 years, where Norway was more or less a mutual for Denmark, as Sweden kept gobbling up bits of them bit by bit. Of course, there were the Brits and French, who somehow, with getting themselves involved in literally anything, led to the union getting dissolved, and finally Norway was once again Swedish, for Christiania became Gustaviania. Under the union with Sweden, however, Norway had its own constitution, Storting, separate institution, but independence was still cooler, so they declared it in 1905, ready to strike at Sweden or at any of the World War I countries, which never happened. But they did get a taste of that panja chocolate. For 2 months, heroic resistance was carried out, and as were years of continued resistance by partisans, fishermen, and some silly bombers, and combined with a terrible collaborationist whose surname literally earned himself the nickname of committing betrayal, treachery, capitulation, sucking, Norway wasn't just any Nazi province. After being one of the last territories to be freed in 1945, Norway continued to live in its beloved feudalism. Until it discovered oil, baby! Norge number in! Now you pay 3 euros for 1 Pepsi, let's go! Oh shit. But to get an understanding of Norway, we gotta go there. Last time we left off right in the middle between Stockholm and the Norwegian border, driving hours through lakes and roadside mucksburgers, and then suddenly appearing in Norway. Because even though they technically aren't in the EU, there is a pathetic excuse of it, meaning that the border is literally impossible to spot. Like, I don't know what I was expecting, but just this? What the fuck, man? It's easy to spot a border between Estonia and Latvia, and that also doesn't exist. There was this monument symbolizing peace between the two nations, which was quite cool, where you get to be in both countries at the same time, once you could spot the border, that is. But where do we stay? If you want an accommodation in Norway, you would have to rent out your kidneys for at least the next year. We have cousins living somewhere here in the southeast, which is pretty much why we went to Norway in the first place. In Norge, life is good. You eat pølser and grilled corn, go to sauna, go swim in a lake or a barrel, and enjoy getting 5 hours of sleep thanks to the place having an unprecedented heat wave. The next day we went to nearby Kongsvinger. Although this area is generally the flattest part of the country, its hills were still really beautiful in my opinion. Maybe because I'm Estonian. In the olden times, the modern day town served as a pathway for traders and travelers passing to Christiania. And in the 17th century, it and the surrounding areas became a center for Finnish immigrants. The town started as a fortress built on top of a hill, with a museum that was free for me, thanks Norbros. To the Sweden not being able to help but launch military campaigns, eventually the Dano-Norwegians considered securing this advantageous position for once, and thus a formidable fortress was built here in 1680. 1882, though it was largely ignored for much of its history until 1814, when they decided that a third Scandinavian state was unacceptable. Therefore, they declared war with a decisive battle to take place here. Unlike most of the other ones, this was more or less equal, with Sweden still prevailing, which marked the creation of the Swedish-Norwegian Union, and the end of Sweden's military extravagances. But that almost wasn't the case. In 1905, as Norway was about to declare independence, something malicious was once again brewing on the border, but the worst case was thankfully averted. In World War II, the fortress managed to be held long enough so that a legend could secure the flag waving atop the fortress and delay the German advance to Elverum, which became the temporary royal capital after the Germans captured Oslo. The town was also a place where partisans would sneak into occupied territory, commit some mischief, and then run back to Sweden. There's the history, but the fortress complex in itself is pretty cool as well, boasting a great view over the town, surrounded by hills and cannons aimed at Sweden. The town itself is pretty chill, I guess, good wooden houses, a mid-town square, some peculiar street signs, and a promenade over the glorious Glomma River, the largest in Norway. But that's also pretty much all in this town, so we headed to a nearby lake, and man, this was cool. Absolutely beautiful, unspoiled nature, and no people and volcanic looking rocks. What a great day it was. But the next day would be an even bigger day. We then drove south and spent the next day and a half in the enemy. No, the other one. Before heading back up to the place you're probably here for, if not for the fjords. The capital, Oslo. Pulling into Oslo, the first thing I saw was, well, a mosque, but the next first thing I saw was the funky opera house and the majestic Oslofjord, home to both incredible nature and Norway's first settlements, including the city of Oslo itself. So what is its history? To explain that, I think there's no better guy to do it other than a Norwegian friend I know.
There's someone around, dude, hold on.
Yes!
So for the purposes of this contribution, gikk Søtter Bergsets kom for å løsrive seg fra det norske undertrykket.
Oslo. The modern-day city was inhabited since the Viking Age, but didn't start to get interesting until Icelandic sagas mentioned its founding in 1048. It became important during the medieval monarchy with the erection of Akershus fortress to defend the city, and as well as that, Catholicism was widespread. It became a Hanseatic city, its population doubled, and essentially became the capital of Norway in the beginning of the 14th century, as King Håkon V stayed there his whole life. However, with all good things, there are some minor setbacks, and for Oslo, it came in the form of the Black Death, numerous fires, a drop in population, and the Union with Denmark. Only in 1624 did Danish King Christian IV now realize that there was no point in restoring the old city, and instead began cooking a new city, which would be named, well, Christiania. The city's defenses, mainly Akershus, were bolstered, especially as Sweden couldn't get its intrusive thoughts out and went to war with Denmark 11 times over Norway alone. But they could never get Christiania until in 1807, when the UK was, well, the UK, which resulted in Denmark, Norway joining Napoleon. But that didn't go so well, and Denmark had to give away Norway in 1814. So finally, with a new constitution on the 17th of May, signed near Christiania, Norway was once again independent, only to be invaded by Sweden, as that's apparently what the big guys of Europe agreed upon in Kiel. It's to be noted that some Norwegian cities, such as Oslo, were bigger than all major cities beside the capital itself. Anyways, Christiania became the seat of the Norwegian Storting, constitution, and all these other cool things. Sweden still allowed us to have, but independence is better. So in 1905, we did so, and 20 years later, the name was changed back to good old Oslo. During both Swedish times and independence, the city flourished with immense growth and many new buildings, factories, and even a metro line, leading to what is today a beloved ski resort. But in came the Germans in April 1940, only to, in an epic plot twist, have their flagship transformed into a single-use submarine in the nearby Oscarsborg fortress. And that gave time for the royal family and forces to make the long, terrible mistake of going to the Isle of Brexit. Under Vidkun Quisling's collaborationist government, life was miserable, with food rations, a ban on Santa Claus, the Jewish population expelled, and with churches completely empty, as the priests would rather die starving than preach the most unpopular Nazi collaborators' ideals. After it was liberated, soon, so were the oil fields. Oslo once again flourished. Aside from a few setbacks today, ranks among the cities with the highest quality quality of life, and one of the fastest growing cities in Europe, beside also being bloody expensive.
Well, what a history. But now I'm here to conquer it, so I may as well rename it the Baljania. I started my tour at the city's oldest and most historic site, the Akershus Fortress, which is home to a series of 3 museums: the Fortress, World War II, and Military Museum. The Fortress was fine, I just liked the building itself. The World War II one was quite interesting, telling the story of one of the most overshadowed and underrated participants of this conflict, where by the way, the first Estonian was killed in, so they should be mentioned more. But if you're gonna visit one, visit the Military Museum. I always think war museums are the best places to see a full history of a country, and this one is no different. Also, it covers World War II in just as much detail, so after that I headed down the lively seaside, the brutalist town hall, lots and lots of modern buildings, and then the filthy rich Aker Brygge shopping quarter, which is similar to what we have, only that 5 times more expensive. Following the tourist radar, you end up on the main old street, mandatory for every European city. But the street is beautiful and with a great vibe. The main sights I expected were quite underwhelming. This is probably the saddest House of Parliament I've ever seen. But hey, I got free coke, and then went for the mandatory Maxburger visit. You also have the Oslo Cathedral with some sort of bazaar right beside it. The church was closed, and knowing how Lutheran churches look like, it probably didn't do any harm. And then on the two ends of the street lie 2 notable things. On one end, the Jørgen and the railway station, and on the other end is none other than the Royal Palace, which is infamously called by its looks a library, not a palace. It still looks cool being on a hill. I even got to see the changing of the King's Guard, which is pretty damn cool. But that was about it for my scorching hot day in Oslo. I always wanted to see it, but it didn't really leave that big of a mark on me, other than just being a well-developed and chilled city, which I don't really see a problem with, and there's still a number of places to see outside the center. I can see why it has flown under the radar for many travelers when they talk about Norway, and I would say that it's actually somewhat overrated. But who am I to say? I still gotta see the other major cities of Norway, and then we talk. And after that, we had to head out home. But it was here that I embraced my true Norwegian self, going to a huge chain of shopping centers right across the border in much cheaper Sweden. But that's about it for my little trip to Norway. I know that pretty much the entire country still lies ahead of me to see, but I did enjoy this little vacation and just visiting local and not so popular places. That being said though, I can't wait to come back and see the west or some other parts of the country. But for now, we head down south, just like the Norwegians in 1107. Takk for at du så på. Jeg håper du likte og ser deg neste gang. Pulling into Oslo,